as an analyst or as a marketer, if I can communicate something to decision makers and get them to try it, to take it action, to do something with the number based on the numbers and what the data is saying, that's success in my mind.
Welcome to What Gets Measured, a NinjaCat podcast about marketing, performance management, metrics, and effectiveness. Because what gets measured gets managed. I'm your host, Jake Sanders. Brent Dykes is a renowned expert in data storytelling and has extensively explored the integration of data-driven mindsets to enhance decision-making. He's the founder and chief data storyteller at Analytics Hero. With nearly 2 decades of enterprise analytics consulting, Brent has worked with small brands like Microsoft, Nike, and Sony, helping them ensure analytics are aligned with business priorities and maximizing value. He's a best-selling author. He's given keynotes out like candy. He's working workshops and leading, learning, and today Brent is on the show to talk about data. Brent, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Jacob. Great to be here.
Thanks for coming along. We just wanted to talk about your trajectory, like how your path unfolded and what drew you into the world of data storytelling. Could you just give us an outline of that? And if there was a specific moment or project that made you realize that this was your calling?
Yeah, I mean, I'll go all the way back to college. When I was in college, I was deciding between data and, accounting and marketing.
Yep.
And so I was deciding between those two. I excelled in my accounting classes, but I really liked the psychology of consumer behavior and stuff around marketing. I decided to go into marketing. And many people were like saying, "What? Why would you not go into accounting? You got a guaranteed, job and security and all these things." And I'm like, "No, I just enjoy marketing more." So I started in marketing, then I got my MBA, and then that's when I pivoted over to the world of analytics because I was hired on to a marketing analytics firm called Omniture, which was later acquired by Adobe. And then that got me fully into the world of data and analytics. And that's where, when I was looking for a job out of college, analytics wasn't a thing. And now, with my MBA and stuff, now it emerged as a way to kind of combine both my passion for marketing with my interest in numbers and data and being inquisitive with the numbers. So that led me into analytics. And then I found that a lot of people were struggling with how they communicate insights. And so then I saw both on my side, on the consulting side, but then also with clients, that this was a real challenge. And so when our company had been acquired by Adobe, and I pitched to this is like back in 2013, I pitched to the committee that was organizing our customer conference. I wanted to do a breakout session on data storytelling, and ended up being like top 2 session of that whole conference. People loved it, and I just really found this is the culmination of everything I'd done up until that moment, and really found a sweet spot, a real passion project, and so that started me down this path, and then eventually I wrote a book, and here I am today.
That's amazing. Yeah, well, I mean, and you can tell your passion, like in the stuff you're posting, all of your blogs, all of your work that you're sharing very generously. You can tell you have a passion for numbers. But just having that alone isn't enough. I think you have sort of cultivated this data-driven mindset. You've talked about it even before when we were booking this show, that came up as a topic. And I just want you to define what data-driven mindset is. And I mean, of course, marketers know that it's crucial, but maybe explain how they're getting the data-driven part wrong about the mindset, or the mindset part wrong. Have fun.
Yeah. So I mean, I've having worked with marketers and many other people, I find some people kind of don't like being data driven. They don't like the driven part of the data. They don't want to be told what to do.
Totally. That's a very American thing.
Yeah. So it's when I look at the driven part, I don't look at it like we're controlled by the numbers. That we're not. We lose our ability to have our autonomy to make our decisions using our judgment and different things. what I think the driven means is up until now, we've pretty much, in many cases, ignored the data when we don't like it, right? We just ignore the numbers. When the
Right.
numbers don't say what we want them to say, oh yeah, let's bury these. Let's
Hide them.
not pay attention to them. We only pay attention to the numbers when they support our agenda or our
Right.
position. And so I think that's where selective attention to the numbers is the problem. And I think it's when I say data driven is we're always looking at the numbers. We're always, how did we perform last month? How are we performing this month? Whether or not that controls every decision that we make, I don't think that's the issue. It's, are we leaning into the numbers, or are we just picking and choosing when we pay attention to them?
Mm-hmm.
I had a conversation with somebody, and they didn't. Some people would prefer data informed.
Oh,
This
yeah.
individual actually used data influenced, and I kind of like data influenced. That's kind of a neat angle if you don't like data driven.
Right. I mean, and we love to get hung up on the terminology.
Semantics.
Yes. Oh boy, we got to use the right, and we love our acronyms
Right.
and stuff. But I love data influenced, and I just wonder how do you get people to like. What I wrote was that you check in with numbers as a sensory mechanism. So in a way, it's an intuition, but it's an informed intuition, but you still need intuition raw to know if the numbers are feeling good. So like, talk to me about the role of like the guts, and then how this I love data influence, like maybe kind of open that up a little bit, and the role of intuition.
Yeah, I mean, if you talked to me earlier in my career, I would have said that intuition and gut instinct are just problematic. That they're
Right.
not. They get in the way. You see all these bad decisions where people ignored the data, they made a decision, and then it bit them in the butt.
Right.
So I feel like, and I've seen some kind of like, there's been some art, I can't remember who kind of coined the phrase, but there's this concept of we make decisions by our gut, by our heart, and by our head, right? By our mind or brain.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that kind of reflects that there's these different. If you've read the book by Daniel Kahneman,
Oh yeah.
Thinking Fast and Slow,
Right.
System 1 and System 2, that really opened my eyes that System 1, that intuition that that I previously looked down on, plays a big role in a lot of the decision making that we make. And so rather than ignoring it or saying it's not important, I think it's a realization in my career that it is a factor in a lot of the decisions we make. And so how can data help us to make intuitively better decisions on an ongoing basis? I think that's where, if we're listening to the data, if we're listening to the numbers, we're kind of building our knowledge, are strengthening and refining our intuition through data. That intuition will then become more reliable, will become more will be sharper and better. And then obviously there's always going to be situations where there's no data that can tell us how. Historical data is not going to help us with every situation that we run into.
Right.
And so in those cases, we have to kind of use our judgment. We have to use our intuition, our creativity, our curiosity, all these skills that we have as human beings to kind of figure out how do we move forward. And we can't become paralyzed by the lack of data in some cases.
Right.
So it's an input. I'm going to say data is a crucial input. You should be paying attention to it. Whether you listen to it in every situation, that's up to you. You use your human judgment. But I do think when I think of data driven, I think of leaning into the numbers. That's what I envision. I don't feel it's not that control aspect. It's more leaning into the numbers and getting as much out of those numbers as we can to help us make better decisions.
Yeah. Well, and I'm just thinking about the disparity in between the data that we get from research that we gather on our own internally, and then it doesn't match up with the external data of the audience, of the effectiveness of the campaign, or it didn't perform like we had the data said it was going to. You're also putting out an interesting point, was like, no matter how tight you drill it in, you still have a probabilistic exchange with the audience. So you have to then it isn't just like, well, the data was wrong. No, no, no. There's new data coming. So,
There's new data coming, and then the questions that comes out of it, like why were we so far off?
right.
What that starts to that makes, I think a data driven mindset will then be curious. Like, what's
Mm,
going on here? Why are the numbers saying this and we're seeing something different?
yeah.
Or why is this disparity? And then getting into the numbers to kind of figure out what's going on here. I mean, I think that's the trigger. It should be more questions, not, oh, the garbage, the data's garbage, throw it out. We're not. No, it's like, wait a second. Why are the numbers so far off? What's the cause? What's creating this gap?
Right. Yeah. And we'll get into data quality too later on, but you bring up a really good point. Like, even if you have a really strong sense of what data should look like or what numbers should feel like, you would be able to even look at a garbage data set and know what's going on. Regardless of the quality, you would still gain a sense from it. So there's always learning, but there's always curiosity, and that might go into this next question about fostering a data-driven culture. Is it about that curiosity? Is it about the mindset? Is it about the numbers? Like, how do you get, you might find one person who's really amped on this. How do you get
Yeah.
everybody amped on it and using data and embedding that mindset across a team?
Yeah. And one thing that I felt, so obviously I specialize in data storytelling.
Hmm.
And if we think about culturally, just remove the data part, storytelling has
Mm,
been, part of our fabric of how we I haven't read the book Homo sapien, but I believe one of his premises that the author um, said is that storytelling is a big part of how we've fostered a culture or a society, and
right.
that storytelling is a big part of that. And so I feel like, okay, well, if storytelling shapes culture outside in the world,
Right.
why not let's use data storytelling to shape a data culture within organizations. So I've
Mm,
crafted a whole white paper on how you can use data storytelling to build a data culture within your organization. Because at the end of the day, right, not everybody's going to be analysts and deep in the numbers,
right.
but you're going to have an audience of people within the organization who love to hear about the customers. They want to learn about how did our marketing channels perform? How did this campaign perform? What about those A/B tests that we ran? They're curious. They're going to want to hear the stories behind, and data is obviously telling these stories. And so I think through this process, now, if you think of if any of your listeners have small children today or had small children, all mine are big now, so I don't
Hmm.
read to them
I
anymore.
got little
But
ones.
when they
Yeah.
were little, yeah, when they were little, I would read to them. Why am I reading to them? It's because ultimately I want them to be curious. I want them to fall in love with books and learning, and I want them to develop those skills. Well, the same thing happens with data storytelling.
Mm.
Now, what are we doing? We're sharing data with numbers and charts and statistics, and people are learning about, oh, I didn't know our customers felt that way. I didn't know that product, performed that way. I didn't know that campaign. They're learning and growing, and through that process, they're building that curiosity. They're building that interest in the numbers and the data. So I really feel like data storytelling can be a great way to foster or cultivate or nurture a data culture within your organization.
Man, I'm just writing this down. There's most people that would love to know a story like that aren't even in your team. Thinking about an
Mhm.
agency, you got, the customer folks, the account people, the sales folks that, they would love to hear this story, but they're never going to hear it unless you tell it. And
Right.
I had an old boss. She said, "Success unshared is failure." And I was like,
Right.
"Oh," because I was thinking maybe I'm like bragging too much. Maybe this is too
Yeah.
much information. I mean, one thing, you got your Slack, you got your email, you got your notifications, you got every possible way you're on the Figma board. You're like, there's all these communication tools that then make it seem onerous to over communicate.
Right.
One thing, when I was early in my career, I would over communicate things to show people that I was on top of it. And then
Yeah.
you And so then it kind of became annoying. They would stop kind of paying attention to me because I was consistently like, so then I had to find that happy medium where what can I do here on my own? Where do I need to involve someone else? What story do I need to tell? Do you think some of the barriers to storytelling or the capacity for that, maybe they don't go back to kindergarten, but they just go down to this shame or like, oh, I don't want to bother you? Or do you know, like, what's preventing people from embracing the fact that they have stories to tell, successes to share, or else they're going to fail?
Yeah.
Do you think, am I onto something?
I mean, I would say, looking back at my corporate career before I started, working for myself in small business, I would say I was terrible at self-promotion. I was
Sure.
always that way. And, maybe it's a fear of, like maybe a humbleness, that can kind of trip us up, that we don't want to be braggy or talking about. But honestly, like I found it in my career, and I've had some bad situations with some report or some people on my team. For example, I had a short story about this. So I had an individual who was a star performer,
Yeah.
right? And so we do the stack rank kind of thing, and then so my stack rank gets merged with another manager's stacked rank, and then other managers, and then my boss then takes all of those and then combines it, and then his manager then combines it with somebody else. Well, this one individual that I had as maybe a high medium eventually got pushed down once you start combining all these stack rankings to where he was a low.
Oh.
Which is crazy. Like, should have never have happened. There should have been communication between me and my manager and his manager.
So the weights and
But
the
it didn't happen.
tables were off a
Yeah.
bit.
Yeah. So whatever happened, and then so it came back to us, and so then I talked to my manager who managed this individual, and I had we were both shocked. We were like, how did this happen? This is terrible.
Right.
We're gonna have to go back to this guy who really was a good performer and tell him. And the only thing we could tell him was, at the end of the day, my boss's boss didn't know who the heck you were. He didn't promote himself. He didn't tell those stories about his successes. And so guess what that guy did? The next year, he talked about all the amazing things he was doing. Now, this is in a consulting environment. So he was working with some of our biggest clients, saving them millions of dollars.
Yeah.
And guess what? He was touting that and telling those stories. And guess what? He got promoted. He went places once he started communicating what he was doing.
One of the things I love about NinjaCat is we're big on shout outs. Like, we're always shouting out people who are doing something. We have a mechanism that's built in for celebrating the small, tiny things. And it is such a revelation. Like, you make people feel like so good when you give them a shout out. And then you let their bosses know, yo, this person's doing amazing work. But we have that built in at NinjaCat, which I love. I don't think I haven't experienced that at any of my other jobs. But, I think maybe one of the ways to get people better at data storytelling is to just get them better at telling their stories, getting more comfortable with sharing. Do you see that as a pathway or
the first step?
Easy?
Yeah, first step. I mean, you're going to have to share the data. Maybe you have an insight that you're trying to. Often when I look at data stories as one of the primary purposes of a data story is to help other people understand the insight that you've uncovered, right? So and I define an insight. Like, sometimes people use the phrase insight very loosely.
Very loosely.
So they say, it's like, oh, that's interesting. Sales are up 200%. There's no why. There's just the what. And for me, that's just an observation. That's not an insight. Once we understand the why behind that 200%, now we're getting into something that's actionable, something that's useful, something that, and the definition that I use for an insight is based on an author, Gary Klein, who said, an insight is an unexpected shift in the way we understand things. So I love that definition. It's very simple. But it's like today you have an understanding of how your products or your customers or your process works. And then you uncover an insight that says, no, actually, that's not the way. Like, let's take a customer example. Our customers buy our product because of X. Well, you do a survey, you do some analysis, you do some interviews, you find out actually they're not buying it because of X, they're buying it because of Y.
Mm.
And then you're like, whoa, like we've been investing in promoting X is the reason to prospects. We've been developing more of that feature X, and we've missed the boat. Like they buy our product because of Y. That changes the game. And so then, okay, now I've got this insight. I need to tell the company. I need to tell product team. I need to tell our marketers. I need to tell the CEO. We've got this wrong. We always thought that they bought our product because of X. It's really because of reason Y. And that ripples through the organization. That is an insight. It changes the way we perceive the world. And then we have to share it in a way that gets people to see it and appreciate it and act on it.
Yeah.
That's where data storytelling comes in.
And that culture is just relationships that are maintained through constant communication, valuable transmission of work. I mean, like, it's interesting that like everyone's worried about how to create a culture, but they're not participating in it. And maybe the number one thing is just participate, like reach out, have mechanisms where people can meet. It's a really interesting, fascinating insight. And then I was thinking about no one wants to be the town crier, because you're walking through the town and you're ringing your bell and you're saying that. And what I thought, to connect to the Slack and over communication, everyone's ringing a bell. So how do you pay attention to which bell to ring? And that goes into my next question, which is literacy. Like, how do you know you have, how do you might feel that insightful thing, but how do you know it isn't just an observation? You need to have some familiarity and literacy with data, how to interpret it to even get to the raw material that you would then tell a story with.
Right.
Like how are you approaching training data literacy, with your clients? Or do you have any methods or, like if you want to improve that, how do you just kind of get in there and fix it? I know it takes a long time.
Yeah. Obviously I focus on the data storytelling, but I had some clients come back to me and say, hey, we love your data storytelling, but we need help with our managers interpreting the data. And that could be data that's going into dashboards. That could be data that's being presented in data stories. They are not processing the information. They struggle with the data listening, so to speak, and interpretation. So what I've developed is a course that I deliver to organizations where it just focuses on how do we interpret data? Like, how do we make sense of these numbers? And it doesn't start with just like, okay, I'm seeing this trend, or I'm comparing the number. No, it goes beyond, like even before that. Like you come to me, Jacob, you say, here's a chart that shows X. I'm like, okay, well, let me look at this chart. What am I looking at here? What is this information? What is the metrics? What's the time frame? What is this information that you're putting in front of me mean? What is it? What am I looking at? So I talk about that step before even interpreting the numbers is an assimilation, where you're just like, okay, Jake has given me some information here. What is it? What am I looking at? And then once I'm comfortable and I understand what I'm looking at, then I move on to then interpreting the numbers, looking at trends or anomalies or patterns. And then the next step would be maybe being a little bit skeptical, putting on that kind of skeptical, can I trust these numbers that Jacob's given me? Is he cherry picking these numbers? Does he have an agenda that he's trying to push? Maybe. I don't know.
If you know me, I do.
Yeah. So that's that critical thinking skills is also a key part of that.
Right.
And then the last thing is curiosity. Once you feel like, oh, this is something I trust Jacob here. These numbers look solid, but oh my gosh, like what's going on here? Like this, now I'm starting to think of like, well, I wonder why that's happening. What's causing that, and digging into it. So we definitely need to have a mindset that is going to be malleable to the data, that's going to be able to do something with it. And so, yeah, there is a data literacy part, and even the basics. Like I don't really even teach the basics, but I've seen that many times where as a consultant, analytics consultant, working with different marketing teams, I've literally come into these organizations and said, okay, so what are you looking at? Oh, we use these metrics. And I'm like, okay, do you understand how these metrics are calculated? Do you understand how they're collected? What do they represent? And I've, on multiple occasions, I've looked behind or popped the hood, and I've said, this is not, you're interpreting this in a way that doesn't represent how it doesn't mean what you think it means, essentially. And so that would be one thing I think is very important to marketers and other people on the business side. Make sure that you understand how these metrics are calculated, how the data is collected, how it's processed. There's I've on multiple occasions I've seen people misinterpreting the numbers just because they didn't understand, behind the curtain how things worked, and then making decisions based on that misinterpretation.
So you're bringing to mind something here. What if you're how would you be able to you would just ask a frank question of somebody after you told this data story. You have your data storytelling, and then there's still a misinterpretation. How do you know you don't just need to tell the story better? Like, I'm going to work on coming up with a different framework when the actual problem is in these people's basic misunderstanding of certain fundamental concepts that are hiding inside of it. Like, how do you separate your idea from saying, I got to tell a better story, to, I really have to figure out if people understand what's happening?
Yeah.
Is there a disparity there?
I mean, I always, my trainings and everything I focus on, you really have to understand your audience. It starts there. That is critical. I mean, you can't just assume that people, oh, they should understand this. They should, they should get this, or even assuming that you understand what their needs are and what their level. I mean, the more you can understand your audience and understand where they're at, right? And then our job as a data storyteller is not to say you need to come up to my level. No, what we're going to do is we're going to come, okay, I see you're a couple levels below me. I'm going to come down. I'm going to help. We're going to, we're going to come up these flights of stairs together. I'm going to help carry you and help you up to the level that I'm at. That's my goal. I want to help you get to my level, not look down on these people as like, you're dumb, you're stupid, you don't get what I'm sharing. I need to come down to your level and help you come up to where I am. And that's the goal of a data storyteller. It involves empathy. It involves understanding. Those are critical success factors to a data storyteller who's going to be impactful.
Gosh, and you mentioned empathy, which I think is like, oh, that's woo woo. Like, we're in data, we're in numbers, we're in business. This is business. It's not personal, Brent. And then you're like, well, if you don't personally understand the audience and everything that's going on with them and the way the marketplace is working, if you don't have a personal, understanding of that, no business is going to come to you. So it's just such an amazing insight that it starts with a deep understanding of the audience and not just the processes or the check boxes that you have to do at your job. It's like, do you know these people that you're trying to sell your widget or your lotion to? I mean, like, let's really think about that for a minute. I love that. Now, talking about data quality, we talked about garbage in, garbage out, that someone with a high understanding and intuition and literacy would even be able to see sense or insights, maybe shifting observations of thought inside garbage data sets. Let's talk about data quality. How do you ensure that organizations are keeping their data clean and then reliable? And what kind of processes go into that? Checking it along the way. Just talk about data quality.
Yeah, I mean, and I'm no expert on data quality. I'm more of a, I'm down the stream from
right.
Where
you like those pristine
happens,
data sets, right? That's what you.
Yeah, which is never happening. But it comes down to having some ownership of the data sets, having standards in place, having people be stewards of the data sets. And so it's not like these data sets are just eroding and collapsing and getting worse and worse over time. Somebody who knows the data, knows the where it's coming from, how it's sourced, it's kind of like some oversight of the numbers. Now, is data going to be perfect all the time? No, there's going to be issues that occur either on the technology side or the collection, or just random things. People are double entering values and things, and nothing malicious was done. But that's going to happen. So we have these safeguards in place. We have these people who are stewards over the numbers, making sure that things. And then also, like, I think in creating a data-driven culture, I think it's important to say to people, it's everybody's job. Data quality is everybody's job. It's not just like, oh yeah, that's we've got a team that focuses on that. No, it's like, hey, you spot something in the numbers, or you notice a process is broken and it's leading to bad data, you say something, you speak up. Everybody makes a contribution to creating a healthier and better kind of data quality environment. And so it's the individuals, it's the processes, it's the standards, it's the executive ownership and leadership of those data sets. It all comes together, and we all, data can be an asset if it has reasonable quality, and that should be the goal that organizations have for their data.
Yeah. I was just thinking about cybersecurity, like
Mm-hmm.
the number, like, no matter what we do with our firewalls and our, air gaps and all the technical ways it's still going to be a fat finger or someone who's lacking just a second to think. And I like how when we're talking about quality, that goes back to culture, then that goes back to mindsets, then that goes back to
Right.
personal. So I love that there's a clear hierarchy for how this
Right.
works. And data is this thing. It's out there. It's flying around. It's ones and zeros. And you're like, no, it's you. It's us.
Yeah.
And
Right.
let's keep pretending that it is. Because when you abstract yourself away from the data layer, that's when you make inhumane decisions. That's when data-driven takes the wheel and just flies off the cliff, Like, well, and that's interesting. I don't know why this is segueing so perfectly, but we're talking about data-driven mindsets. We're in the era of AI. The agents are here. The
Yeah.
chatbots are coming. And if you've been in marketing for long enough, you remember the first couple of times when the chatbots showed up. Oh, weren't they going to change the game? But
Yeah.
I'm seeing like, okay, so this is big data. This is massive data, that we're
Yeah.
having to deal with. What is the future of data storytelling and decision making for marketers and businesses, and that data-driven mindset in an AI era?
Yeah. I think, obviously, I think some of these are further ahead in developing a data-driven mindset. And I think they're going to be the ones that succeed in that AI era, because at the end of the day, AI is going to, it's a powerful tool. It can go through volumes of data like no analyst or anybody could, but it's going to surface things that maybe are questionable, and it will hallucinate and it will do these things. And I think, I've even experienced that myself as I've been working on different things. I'm like, I'll enter in something to Chat GPT, and then it'll spit out what I at first glimpse or brush is
Blush,
like,
yeah.
oh my gosh, this is amazing.
Ooh.
This is so good. And an example of this, I was working on my course, and I wanted to have some examples to kind of practice examples. And so I kind of give it in a scenario, and it generated a bunch of use cases. And I was like, this is amazing. And then I was like, oh, wait a second here. It's making the same logical error in its answers. And it was the same over and over on each one. And
Whoa.
so if I wasn't an expert in the data or the use case, I would have said, oh, this is like great. Like if I would have just said, if I couldn't critique the answers from the AI, I could have said, oh, these are great. I'll use these as use cases. And then sure enough, I would have students come back to me saying, I don't think your answer is right. Have you thought about it this way? So there is a role for us as human beings with this AI world. There's certain skills that we bring to the table, and I talk about this in an article I did on Forbes called the Human Data OS. And there's certain capabilities that we bring to the table. Actually, there's a different article. Actually, it wasn't that one; it was a different one. But I wrote about how we bring, what do we bring to the table? We bring our judgment, our human judgment. We bring our creativity, our curiosity, our contextual awareness. All of these things that aren't in the model,
Mm.
and so we, our skepticism, our critical thinking skills. Those are things that can complement the power and the capabilities of AI, but we are still a part of this process. So yeah, I mean, some companies that want to automate everything, but I think that would be a mistake. There are only certain types of activities I think that can be automated. Many things can be augmented through AI, not automated.
Yes,
And so, yeah, go
well,
ahead.
I'm seeing the shift in the way people are talking about it, because when it came out, it was like, oh, okay, pack your bags, everybody. We're
Right.
done. And then they're like, well, actually, it kind of, and then it's starting as it gets more into this assistive, agentic. We love
Yeah.
our words. When it gets into that, I'm really seeing people taking it in the spirit in which it should have been offered originally, was like, this is the thing that's going to help you, if you can, detail hyper specific task oriented processes. If you can tell me what those things are, then we're going to help you. But if you
Yeah.
can't, and that's where I think this kind of connects a little bit. I came up with a data discernment. I think that could be
Mm,
another one
right.
that is just sort of like, I'm able to parse through, not like what the quality of it, but what is where is it coming from. And we just have our discernment, which you need to have, which I think is
Yeah.
connected to the ability to not only hear stories but tell them. But that it just seems like it's all connected. And for the
Yeah.
people that are really focused in on the benefits of this tool, phew, it's going to be, but there's going to be some people that are frustrated. I mean, what do you think? Do you have? I'm just kind of thinking like a prediction, like there's going to be a lot of people that are using this stuff, but then realizing that it's similar to the way chatbots were back in the day when they were released. Everyone was like, we have a
Yeah.
chatbot, or we have an app. I don't know if y'all remember the appification of the world, but everybody thought they needed
Right.
an app. And my one job as a marketing consultant was talking people out of it. I was like, you don't need it. You just don't need it. And they're like, but I think we do. And I was like, it's just going to eat up a bunch of time, man. But some people had good apps that came out of it. Some people had good chatbots that come out of it. Some
Yeah.
people are going to have good AI that comes out of it.
Hmm.
But I think, to your point, if you don't have data listening, storytelling, discernment, influence driven, not controlling, but opening,
Right.
associative things that enhance, I mean, like, I'm starting to see the shift. I love that you're talking about it. Really good advice. What I wanted to ask is if you could just give us maybe a story of when you came on board with a client and got their whole data story right, ended in a Cinderella fashion. And then also, if you have a data horror story, we'd like that too.
Okay. Well, I'll pick on two experiences that I had. So, what do you want first? The Cinderella story or the horror story
I mean,
first?
people like the tragic stuff right off the bat.
Okay, let's go tragic. So this is not me working with a client, but this is my own experience. So
Right,
I
aware of
was
it.
I was an MBA intern working at a direct catalog retailer in their e-commerce department. One of multiple MBA students, all vying for a job, right? And
Right.
we had to present to a SVP who was a former Special Forces helicopter pilot, former military, very stern, very intimidating, very intelligent. And we had to do a midpoint presentation to him to kind of talk about our projects that we are working on. And so I had stumbled across some interesting data that showed that our customers didn't value our shipping policy as highly as we thought. Now, this shipping policy was a cornerstone of this e-commerce department. So it was kind of like, a sacred cow. And I naively thought, you know what? I need to share this data point because he needs to hear it and his managers need to hear it because this might be helpful, right?
Right.
And I was
Right.
trying to be a good trooper, and
Right.
and so I was like, okay, it wasn't even related to my project. That was
Mm,
the silly thing.
mm,
But I was like, I want to surface this because I wanted to make people aware.
mhm.
So, a couple weeks later, I'm in a boardroom. He's in the middle, other managers around the table. I get to that data point that showed our customer shipping policy,
Right.
our shipping
Wasn't
policy
favorable. Yeah.
wasn't favorable. And he looked at it a moment and then he said, bullshit. And I was like, oh crap, I have just stepped on it. And I was flustered at that point. I was expecting the reaction like, hey Brent, that's really interesting. We should take a closer look at. Hey, could you spearhead an initiative to dive into that and really understand what's going
and
on?
I love it when they got you on their shoulders and there was confetti.
Exactly.
And I was like, oh, the balloon, the marching band was too much, but
we're not just giving you a job. We're going to give you a massive bonus for shine.
Here's a car.
Anyway, so
okay.
Yeah, a car. So anyways, I was a little bit stunned by that. Luckily, my mentor jumped in, gave me some cover fire, and I got out of that room relatively unscathed. But it taught me a really valuable lesson that when you communicate something like a data point or an insight like that, you need to communicate it in a way that's really going to communicate it fairly. That's going to give it a shot, right? And I just kind of put it out there, and it got shot down. And so that was my horror story. But that horror story then led me into what I do now. I focus on helping other people to communicate their insights. So that's my horror story. You want to hear my positive story?
It's also like an origin story, and so that's great.
Yeah, it's kind of an origin story.
That's awesome. Okay, yes, please.
So I'll try and be quick with this one. So this is when I was a consultant. I was working with a very big technology company, and I would do a recurring kind of analysis of their marketing campaigns and different parts of their business. And so I would analyze a bunch of stuff and present it. I honestly, I didn't feel like I had a really good relationship with them in the sense that we'd never met in person. It was all over the phone. And I felt like sometimes I'd kind of like, hey, I found this, or I found this, or I found this. And they wouldn't, I don't know where it went. So anyways, it was kind of like, and this is a recurring basis. And then one meeting, I shared something where I had found that their calls, so they had a call center that would go online whenever it was like out of their
operators
office hours.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
And so the people would go to this website, and there was a spike outside of the windows of when the call center was open. So people were trying to reach them outside of their call center hours. And so I shared this information. I said, hey, you might consider opening up a little bit more your office hours so that maybe you could, get some of these leads and turn them into sales. They didn't say anything. They didn't make any, nothing, no kind of acknowledgement of it. But the next time we met, they said, oh, at the end of the call, they didn't even talk about it at the beginning of the call. They kind of said, oh, and by the way, we ran a test to see, we actually opened up the office hours to see, and it didn't materialize into anything. And then kind of ended roughly that way. And I was like, wait a second. I was able to get them to test opening up their office hours, like their call center. And whether or not they did it the right way or whatever.
Right. I was just about to say, like you did for a half hour. They were like, nah, Brent's wrong.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know how they approached it or whatever, but the cool thing, from my perspective, I'd love to say, oh, and I saved them $4 million, or I generated $4 million in additional. No, it didn't go anywhere. They did a test. It didn't pan out. But here's the thing. This is a big freaking company.
Right.
And I provided an insight and communicated in a way in which it inspired them to take an action and run a test, do a proof of concept. I can't ask for anything more. Would I love to have a story where it was like, and Brent saved the day and that company reported the earnings, on the earnings call, he was able to, no, I didn't get that, but I was able to drive some action. And I think as an analyst or as a marketer, if I can communicate something to decision makers and get them to try it, to take it action, to do something with the number based on the numbers and what the data is saying, that's success in my mind.
Oh my gosh, that's great. Yeah. And everybody wants to be, the closing act, they want to have standing ovations. Just be happy somebody showed up. That is the win. This celebration of your genius. And oh man, I mean, when you were telling me that story, I was like, I almost did the same thing. I've done the same thing numerous times, handing off things that I think this will be interesting. They don't even read it. They don't even, I mean, and you're talking to agencies who make dashboards, like they never look at the dashboard. Well, here's your call. Tell them a better story. Find out what matters to them. Take this advice that Brent is giving to you. But I wanted to end really quickly with one question. If you had one piece of advice to a marketer, advertiser out there struggling with data, what's your advice on the data-driven mindset or just data alone? Like, you're passing them by. Like, what would you say to them?
I would say always ask yourself, what does the data say, right? So it's always thinking about, when whatever situation we're in, okay, what do the numbers say? And that means avoiding speculation, quick judgments. It's keeping an open mind. It's hearing what the numbers have to say. And then challenging the data to understand what's happening, not challenging the data to dismiss it, if that makes sense. So you're trying to get understanding. If you don't like the numbers, what they're saying, why are they saying that? I need to understand at a deeper level, so that you might just say, you know what, I think we need to change the way we're doing things, or we need to change how we're moving forward based on what the data is saying. So that's my one piece of advice. Always ask yourself, what does the data say?
Oh man. And if you did that not only in your job, but in your personal life, I mean, imagine the benefits that you could get, rather than getting scared at some chart, from a finance or, health or, other things. You can say, hey, what is this saying? Where does it come from?
Yeah.
What does it represent?
Right.
So gorgeous. All right. So how can people connect with you online and learn more, Brent?
Yeah. If people, obviously I'm on LinkedIn. I used to be on Twitter, but I'm no longer there. So you can find me on Blue Sky. And then also effectivedatastorytelling.com. That's where you can find my book. You can see, if you want to talk to me about a workshop or training, I'm going to be rolling out a new masterclass on data storytelling, and that's coming hopefully in the next few weeks. So I don't know when this podcast will go out, but it should be hopefully out there, and you can, if you want to learn more, or if you want you get your team up to speed on data storytelling, you can either look at the course or a workshop and get your team trained up.
Cheese or chocolate?
Are you ready?
Okay.
Cheese or chocolate?
Chocolate.
Okay. Don't say.
And it's hard though. Those are two. I like both cheese and chocolate.
I know. That's why we started out. I'm asking the tough questions, Brent. Paul or John?
Paul, probably.
Okay.
Sorry.
No.
Yeah.
No apologies here at the end of the episode. Yeah. We're good. On a beach or on a boat?
On a beach.
Yeah.
On a beach.
Yeah. Less drowning risk. Pancakes.
Yeah.
Pancakes or waffles?
Ooh. I'm gonna go waffles.
I like your style. Darth Vader or elevator?
Darth Vader.
It's like, what? Is there even an option? Oh, anyway. All right. And finally, Led Zeppelin or Pink Floyd?
Led Zeppelin.
Rock on.
What Gets Measured is a NinjaCat podcast. Please rate and review the show wherever you find your podcasts. Share this episode on social, and visit us on the web at ninjacat.io.